Well, thank you all. It was a good discussion with the Assembly to kick off the budget process. As you can see, this was an overview. They've all been given binders several inches thick that really contain the in-depth details department by department. And we will have several work sessions where we will get into that level of detail with them. Typically in the budget process, each department head makes presentations and really outlines what are the specifics within their budget in terms of personnel changes, the cost of their departments, and of course this year, as you know, really much more focus on what are the services they're delivering and how are they going to be able to show to the public that they're delivering those services in a measurable and effective manner. So clearly the highlights of the budget were that we do have some new revenue sources which help the budget. We have a modest increase in property taxes, 1.6%. Over 1% of that is things that the voters have approved, O&M costs associated with bonds, etc. And so really about a 0.6% increase in new costs. And then, of course, the other highlights are that we're about $11 million under the tax cap, and we feel like we listened to the public and incorporated their feelings about the budget into our presentation, which was, hold the line, become more efficient, and if you do seek new revenues, we'd like it to be from something other than property tax. There was some discussion today, of course, about the tobacco tax, which we did not incorporate into the budget because, again, it hasn't passed yet. But we are projecting long-term that if that is a new revenue source, then that certainly helps down the road as well. So with that, gladly answer any questions you have.
With the cuts to the police and fire department, you had mentioned grants that you were, at least one that you'd heard that you got partial funding for, and then one that you're still waiting for the police, for the fire department?
Correct.
Is that, in your opinion, a responsible way to craft a budget? I mean, having positions contingent on grants which eventually run out?
Well, obviously, in terms of the fire department, we don't have the grant yet, so what we've done is budgeted as if we don't have it. So we think that is responsible. It would have been irresponsible to budget as if you already had the grant, and in other words, assume that you had that revenue. We didn't do that. So this budget does reflect not having grants.
But you'd be okay if you do get the fire department grant, for example, putting those positions, sure, putting some positions back in, and then, even though that is temporary.
Yeah, we've said that on these grants we look at them kind of one by one and make a decision. Is it something that we feel comfortable doing, or are we just really moving the problem down the road? It seems like over the years, public safety grants have been, as we've analyzed this, been somewhat consistent. So we're not uncomfortable doing it this year. It's not my preferred method, but again, if public safety is job number one, and you can maintain positions either through sustainable revenues or several-year grants, we're willing to look at that.
Under the Parks and Rec budget in this plan here, you say that the aquatics programs will help save roughly $150,000 from the things you detail here. You say there are $880,000 in reductions. Where are some of those other reductions taking place in the Parks and Rec department?
They're across the board. I mean, Parks and Rec, has maintenance personnel. They've got program personnel that run ongoing recreational programs. Those aren't detailed in that one, but they are detailed in the bigger budget book. And you could probably get hold of John Rada and have him give you more detail about the specifics of that.
And can you again detail basically 110 positions eliminated, but some of them are vacant, and even the ones that aren't, they're being transferred to a different source?
Yeah, we've got 110 positions will be eliminated from the budget. 54 of those positions are currently filled, and 56 of them are vacant. Of the 54 that are filled, only 31 are actual layoffs because some positions are actually moving to being funded by grants. And we don't include grants in terms of our general operating budget. They're off budget, if you will. Health and Human Services, for example, is funded mainly by grants. And so they're able to move personnel into grant funding.
Okay. The public transit budget, fares are going to be increasing as a part of that?
There's a combination of some route adjustments, and there's are some fare changes, yeah.
Do you have any specifics on how much they're going to be going up?
Oh, again, I refer to each department head to give you the specifics on those. This, again, today really just at the high level, what each department's cuts are going to be, or what their budget's going to be, big dollar wise. But Jody Cars, or you could have Cheryl Frasca can give you the, the fare increases or decreases.
How are you able to justify, fare increases specifically? I mean, you talk about that you're not for a tobacco tax, for example, because it targets potentially a certain demographic of individuals.
Well, no, wait, I didn't say I'm not for it. I said in the discussion, people have to remember that there's sometimes unintended consequences when you have a particular sector tax. And in tobacco, the lower socioeconomic group does use tobacco at a higher rate than the higher socioeconomic group. But I didn't say that that made me for or against it.
Okay, we'll be clear on that.
Can I
But-
piggyback on your question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Public transportation, the fares are changing, which I assume means increasing, on some routes.
Yeah.
And then some of the routes
Well,
are
not on
being-
routes so much, too. It's things like we give group passes, we give discounts to organizations. Those are some of the changes as well. But really, I would advise you to talk to Jody Cars and get the detail.
But some of the routes, the frequency is being dropped, so in effect, people are paying more for getting less?
No, they're still getting a ride from point A to point B for the same amount of money. It's just that the routes won't be running quite as often. I mean, you can't run you can't ride several routes at the same time. So you might have to get to the bus stop 30 minutes earlier to get the same transportation to get to your location. So it's really a route adjustment. So, I mean, like I say, you're still paying for the same service.
Just less convenient.
Hopefully, they'll still find the schedule adjustments convenient enough. So, I mean, that's the goal. Again, I mean, it's one of those things where when you're faced with our budget challenges, every department has to participate in the solutions. We tried to actually minimize impact on transit, and so there's very few elimination of routes like have been done in the past. It's more route adjustment in terms of times, because again, people have to get to work, and we recognize that.
I'm very sorry. Go ahead.
What happens to the actual equipment in the fire department, for example, that's not going to be used anymore? Where does that go?
It can be used as backup equipment when other equipment's down for maintenance. These machines are used, quite a bit, and they do have their time when they're in the shop for either scheduled routine maintenance or if something breaks, and so they do serve as backup vehicles.
So are they going to be physically sitting in the stations, just not being used?
Well, I don't know exactly where they put them. They might be behind the station.
That's all I have.
Can you give me some examples of the ways that you, like you said, you pay attention to the community conversations? Can you give me some examples of what you've done for this budget?
Sure.
To pay attention to that?
Well, again, what we heard from the community was they didn't want to see their taxes increased unless we were able to show that we were running a more efficient government. And we've started that process already. In this budget is the reorganization, for example, of the Community Planning and Development Department, which now becomes Community Development and Public Works. It streamlines 5 positions. It saves $630,000 a year. That's what the public wanted to hear from us, and that kind of initiative is going on in every department. Additionally, there's just a very, very modest increase in property taxes, and most of that is for things that the voters have already approved that they wanted to pay the associated costs with. So that's where we listened. They said, don't raise my property taxes, show us you're more efficient, and try and maintain service levels at an acceptable level. And we think we've done that in just about every area. So, and then the other thing they said was, if you do add revenues, don't put it on us homeowners, find some other sources. And I think you've seen that, again, Chairman Trainey's proposal on tobacco tax fits right in with those community dialogues.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes?
Casey with Anchorage Daily News. And forgive me if you already answered this question, but you talked a little bit about sort of the structural problems of spending and depending on grants for public safety year after year. But then also later mentioned that that you anticipate some of those grants coming through. What's the difference between those two statements?
Well, we have said in the past that we do not want to rely on one-time monies for a budget that's unsustainable.